Good evening again, and welcome back to After Dark, Part 2. Now, we saw in the last movie of how a remake for a horror movie was adequately done, although The Wolfman did get a lot of flack. In this one, we're going back to 1999 to look at Stephen Sommers' The Mummy. Now, this is another remake. Now, from what I understand, Universal Studios had been trying to get this movie off the ground since 1992, but you know how some movies spend so much time in developmental chaos that it could be years before a movie gets done. I mean, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, or TMNT, which was released in 2007, is a prime example of developmental problems. With this one, we are set in mid-1920s Egypt with the lead cast of Brendan Fraser, of George of the Jungle fame and Dudley Do-Right, leading the cast as Rick O'Connell, as a former member of the French Foreign Legion Army. We get Rachel Weisz as Evelyn Karahan, who is an Egyptologist from England, and John Hannah as Jonathan Carahan, whose comedic performances help to lighten the mood. And we get Oded Fehr, I hope I pronounced that correctly, as Ardef Bey, a member of the Magi, who is a descendant of the Pharaoh Seti's bodyguards. And Kevin J. O'Connor as the cowardly Benny, who is basically the human punching bag in this movie, and the lead and title character, Arnold Vosloo, as the Mummy and High Priest Imhotep, who some people have the thinking that this look was somewhat of an inspiration for the Dark Knight Rises Bane, or as Random DCE calls him, Gimp Vadertep. What is there to say? In terms of the writing, this is one of Stephen Sommers' best movies, which is also held in the same regard as its sequel, The Mummy Returns, in 2001, which marked the debut of former 8-time WWE champion The Rock, and also one of his finer movies, which I don't think is held in such high regard, Van Helsing, starring Hugh Jackman as Abraham Helsing. What I like about this particular movie is it's a nice blend of action, thriller, horror, but with a very healthy balance of comedy, because it's not an outright comedy, but there are comedic moments that are put in the right places that helps to sort of ease the tension. Like, for example, Rick will ask Evelyn how she is, and then John will say, "Oh, I don't know, if I've been for a bit of an ordeal," and Rick's like, "What?" Arnold Vosloo, who plays Imhotep, superb acting. What I like in some aspects is, although Imhotep is this evil creature in the movie, there is that sort of side of him where you kind of admire. You don't admire what he does to get a Nox Son of Moon back, played by Patricia Vascle. Comment section below if I'm wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a romantic gesture to still be in love after 3 millennia, but to kill people, no, we don't like that. No. Rachel Weisz's performance, she's actually one of the few British actresses that I like, that I can enjoy her performances in the same breath and regard as, say, Sophia Myles of Thunderbirds, actually no, it's not even acknowledged that, of Underworld fame, and Moonlight. which I honestly believe is very underrated, and it needs a movie. And Kate Winslet, a very wonderful English rose who came to prominence in Emma and Titanic some 15 to 17 years ago. Very good movies. Well, Titanic especially. The movie has this very rollerball kind of feel to it, in the sense that nothing ever really slows down enough to where you can kind of take a breath. I mean, even during the non-action scenes, there is that sense that there's still something going on. The wheels are still turning. Someone had said once before that there is a good comparison with this to, say, like the Indiana Jones series. The momentum is constantly moving and going forward. And when you have a movie like that, you've got the ingredients for a fine classic and a movie that will be watched in high regard for years later. Although I cannot say the same for The Mummy 3, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, but those opinions will be reserved for another time. The rest of the cast, very good supporting roles. I do like Ardef Bey, the way that he will stop at nothing to make sure that this creature is not discovered, that Imhotep is not allowed to walk the earth again. And then once the unfortunate event that Imhotep has been released from his sarcophagus and is allowed to walk the earth, his number one priority is to make sure the creature goes no further and that he is stopped by any means necessary. You could sort of see his actions as being somewhat harsh with what happens in the opening scenes of the movie, but vicariously, if there is a rather unsavory character that is lurking beneath the sands, that an apocalypse will come forth if this creature is allowed to come back into the land of the living. Well, to a degree you can sort of overlook what he does. The score is excellently done, really sets the mood and the tone of Egypt at that time. I mean, regardless of whether it was in Egyptian times or in the period that this movie was set within the mid-1920s, it's perfect. This was the movie that got Brendan Fraser, to really come to prominence, because after this, he would then go on to eventually make movies like Inkheart, which is actually considered one of his best movies today. And strangest thing is, when they did get round to do Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, some 9 years after this movie was released, he was the only original cast member, because for whatever reason, Rachel Weisz would not return for a third one. Now, whether this was a case of there was scheduling conflicts, or just a simple case that she did not want to return, that remains to be seen. But for a horror / adventure / fantasy comedy movie from the late 90s, this has a strong rewatch value, even to this day. In some particular lights, the CG has not aged too well, but in the rest of it, the writing helps to support it immensely. Great ensemble cast, as I mentioned, and the wit and the timing of John Hannah and Brendan Fraser, along with Kevin J. O'Connor. It's one of those movies you could have watched it the first time in June of 1999. You could have watched it in August of 2005. You could watch it, in October of 2013. It's one of those movies. It has a timeless quality, and it's a movie that you can watch and never get bored of it. So, what do I give Stephen Sommers' The Mummy from 1999? Well, I shall simply say a must. For it is a sad trend when movies of yesteryear are becoming much better in terms of quality than movies that we have today. Unfortunately, the sign of the times is that the technology improves in regards to special and visual effects, but the script does not. And when you look at movies that does not have a huge budget, you make them work on the story more, because as long as the story is solid, no one's really going to care too much what you have for your visual and specials. It helps, but people are more concerned about the story. Well, in the next chapter of the After Dark series, we are going back in time, once more, to late 19th century Victorian England for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Until then, I bid you good night.